Again, welcome everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. I think we got a fair amount of people, so let's get started on some questions. I'm going to dip this out of here and go over to my Word document. And of course, let's just kind of go back in time for a moment, a couple days, and take a look at what we've covered so far. Like I said at the top here, we are talking about random velocity on a track. So that was our MIDI transform. And, what you really want to do is be able to take notes and either make them very robotic or make them not so robotic, make them sound more humanistic. So, this is why, MIDI transform and all of the options in the MIDI transform um, are an important way of kind of taking your performances and turning them into something um, a little less or a little more the way you want it. What groups can do a track? Again, bad wording, but fine. We talked about temporary groups and not temporary groups. We talked about feedback on a track. We did look at a lot of track stacking stuff again, the difference between a summing and a folder. Again, those questions are already in a quiz on the Google Classroom. You can always go over and retake the quiz or look at the questions again. I find that interesting that you can go back to that. And of course the notes are out there too on the stream. Filter in 808, we were talking about whether you're going to use filtering as a post MIDI signal. So for instance, EQ, compression, reverb, distortion, all that stuff. Or if you want to use a MIDI effect, you can do it that way. Or you can actually go into the root generator of an 808 and change. Reverse MIDI in audio, that was kind of cool, right? We were talking about how we can reverse MIDI positions, we can reverse MIDI samples, and then we can bounce MIDI out to audio and reverse audio. How can I record multiple tracks? Well, we did that. Obviously, you needed an interface. We did that with the guitar, and since we had the guitar out at that point, we did Amp Designer, we did Pedal Board, and talked a little bit about those and how to kind of manipulate certain sounds. Again, I'm not a huge fan of either one in the way they generate their signals. But for the, guitarist that doesn't have a lot of options, it's actually a viable option. That Ghost World that I used yesterday was pretty fun. I've used that in a couple of projects just to have these like really subtle, trickling, dripping guitar signals in the background, kind of like ambisonic stuff, or we'll say environmental stuff, ghosting as they call it. Makes Ghost World a good one. We did talk about bouncing a clip in place, how to do it and why we do it. We do it either to relieve the computer of the processing. We do it either I don't like doing it in place of. I like bouncing a clip because then we can always use it as a sample, or we always have a full version of that file at hand. But there's a couple of different ways to do it and a couple different reasons to do it. And so we went through all that. Again, if you weren't sure of those answers, go back to the videos on YouTube and check them out. How did he mix sub bass with the melody that good? Referring to the master class and how the gentleman was working, in the low end. We talked a little bit about that in one of two ways. Basically, you should probably have a sub speaker, which allows you to monitor that really low end only. We used EQ to identify, anything really below 100 hertz is in that sub bass area. And then we also took a quick peek at the sub bass plugin, which is in this area of Logic that allows you to work on either the really high or the really low. The opposite to the sub bass would be the exciter. So we'll get back to that when we get into our plugins. For most of what we've been doing, I think we've covered all of those, except for really talking about sub bass at that point. I want to learn how to record my vocals better, like what kind of mic to use and room you should be in, right? So we did kind of talk about that. And as I said, you got to have the right idea of who the vocalist is. We'll say, what kind of mic you should choose. Now, this goes back to our mic week that we did. You should know a lot about the microphone so that way you make a good decision on what kind of mic you're going to use. So, for instance, I'm using an SM7B. I use that for all vocal recordings here at my house, but I'm not doing live performances. Though we did talk about how Miley Cyrus on SNL this past week actually used an SM7B next to the fire to sing the cover of a "Wish You Were Here" by Pink Floyd. Not bad. Not a Miley Cyrus fan, but she did a pretty good job. I really like the song too, so it kind of helps that she picked a pretty decent song. And then, we covered some other things down here. What do different pedals do? We kind of talked about that yesterday. How many live instruments you can record at a time? We dove into that yesterday, talking about what Logic's limits are. We know now Logic's new affirmation of what they've done to the program, and their new version allows you to record 1,000 tracks at a time. But obviously, you have to have 1,000 inputs, which would never be the case. So obviously you would record, maybe like 100 at a time, and you do 10 different inputs or 10 different tracks for each performance of 100 different mics. It's crazy. Um, and what are the differences between summing and folder? Yeah, and so like I said, we covered that up here in the track stack. So that's where we're at today. And again, thanks everyone for joining in. It is 10:15 on your radio dial. Let's go through some more of these. All right. So let me pop open Logic really quick, and let's put some work in here. Let's admit some people. Still got people crawling in, which is I don't know. Hey, wait, Vince, what's up, buddy? Go ahead. You're there.
Is it too late to hand in late work?
No, it's never too late to hand in late work. Listen, regardless of what happens, whether we go back to school or we don't, all work is due by the end of the year. I mean, all work for this quarter is due by the end of the year. So as long as you hand it in by that last day in June, which I think it's like June 14th, 15th, I'm still going to accept it. If you go over to the Google Classroom, Vince, even though it says it was due April 10th, you can still get in there and submit it. It'll just come up in my feed as being late. And so when I grade it, it's just going to have in the thing, yeah, it's late. So you'll just receive a couple of points off, but at least you'll have a grade in there. A 0 will be counted as a 0. Good. You have your hand up again. I'm trying to, I'll put it down. There we go. Christian, what's up?
Um, uh, Sorry.
Okay.
I had a question about this app that I found called BandLab.
What is it called?
It's called BandLab or something.
Band Lab. Okay.
Yeah. Um, how good is it for um recording sound or something? I don't know. I don't know how to ask the question correctly.
Well, I mean, BandLab is mostly a social media creation platform. It's kind of like a SoundCloud. So obviously they're trying to take a little business away from the SoundCloud world. It looks like it's cloud based. So obviously you would store audio up there. And I don't know how the creation tools work. Being an app, you're kind of limited to a phone. And I don't know how much solid recording people are doing with a phone. But I mean, that's what I can gather from that app, just doing a quick one over on it.
Right.
It's like anything else. More than likely, you'll get a couple of, free moments or time or space, and then you'll end up having to pay a monthly subscription and be part of that. And it's where you would collaborate, basically a SoundCloud model.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
cool.
you.
I mean, I appreciate you going out there and looking at stuff because, there's so many resources out on the internet. And, you know, this is that time where you have those moments that you can, in a sense, spend the time you need getting to know certain things that are out there. Otherwise, a lot of times you get wrapped up in your day-to-day life. Now, since we have, this large amount of time to kind of sit and think, going out and researching and finding things is a good idea. Can find things you'll never have stumbled upon if you weren't looking for them, right? They're not going to come to you. You got to go to them. All right. So yeah, let's go back through our question section here. For this part, I would like to learn much more about mics they use, and as I have trouble figuring out what to use and what I get for myself. So, I think we covered that yesterday. I didn't go back and highlight that as far as I saw. So it's pretty much falls under the discussion we had about microphones. having a good mic or the right mic for the job, having the correct frequency, being able to, um, be the the benefit to the microphone. You don't want to pick a large capsule condenser to record really low end sounds, because that doesn't make sense. That's not what's natural to that microphone. What's natural to a large capsule condenser is that mid and high range. So, that's kind of part of the decision making, but it also has to do with your knowledge of the microphone itself. All right, so let's see here. What are more ways to add excitement to your piece? Ooh, I like it, because I was going to talk about the exciter anyway, because we talked about the sub bass information. So let's do it. Let's play this down. All right, so yesterday we took that as the example to add submix, but the problem was obviously I don't have a submix speaker here, and coming out of my speakers and into this mic and then in through Zoom really isn't very helpful. But so we took it at a point where we were looking at maybe increasing the low end to give some really thud, some really low bass signal to that. Excitement would probably be somewhere up and around between about 2K and 10K. So you can actually take one of your parameters here and you can move it and adjust it and add a little bit of that high end. And by a little bit, I really do mean a little bit. We're talking about maybe 4 or 5 at tops, maybe 6 decibels. Remember, everything you add or subtract here actually will add and subtract to the total sound. So by doing what I just did, more than likely, I'm going to get a little more of that excitement in the snare part. Let's take a listen. And see, that snare now really cuts through the mix because I spent a little time working on the higher frequencies where excitement, quote unquote, would live. But let's talk about in terms of a plugin. Yesterday, we went in and ended up going into our specialized category and seeing that there's a sub bass and an exciter. So a sub bass basically works on the lower end frequencies, as we know, and an exciter is going to work on the high end frequencies. So let's open up the exciter for a moment, and would you look at that? So as you can see, it's very very basic. It gives you the frequency in which you're going to base around what you want excitement to be, and I said it's around 2K or 20,000 hertz. You do want the dry signal in, you don't just want the wet. And then there's some harmonic area you can add in. And then different colors will give you different levels of excitement. And you can, again, adjust the frequency range. You can play around with the harmonics. But basically, what you're doing is going through and trying to get to that point of what you're looking for in your mind to sound on your speakers or your headphones. In the preset area, there actually is a little bit of options that you have. Add silver. This basically just means like, really shiny, tinny kind of sound. Artificial overload. I don't know if I want to ever do that, but maybe, depending if I'm looking for an effect. Edge addition. So just give it a little bite. Refreshing airless material. So there's could be stuff in there that is kind of airy and allows it to breathe a little bit. And this is kind of going to take a look at that and try to refresh it, I guess. We can play around with it in a second. Sizzle, love it. And then vocal edge. And vocal edge I have used before in some of my vocal recordings to try to get a little more boost out of my signal. Andrew, you trying to say what's up, or are you just having trouble with your phone?
Yeah, I have to say what's up. So you said there is a knob with harmonics above it. Can you explain that more?
This one right here?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So what are harmonics, right? These are overtones and undertones of a central frequency. So basically what you're saying is if I have my central frequency at 2000 hertz, then 10% under and over is going to kind of be part of that excitement. And you can increase that, all the way up to 200%, which is a lot more of the frequencies that are going to be covered. As I bend this, you're really not seeing any change over here. So it's going to be all about what it sounds like. Let me just give you an example. So, for instance, we just went through the descriptions of some of these presets. Let's see what these presets say about what harmonics have to do with it. So, if I add silver, wow, all of a sudden my harmonics are flying through the air, right? 158%. If I go to just Edge Edition, I'm dropping down to 92, and my vocal edge is 87. And then just refreshing airless material, actually shoves it way up there again. Sizzle, 134. Edge Edition, we did. And last one was Overload, which isn't actually all that much harmonics. When you open up the plugin by default, it should be pretty low. So let's listen to, and this is why I was saying, and by the way, the frequency changes with these as well. Let's listen to changes in just harmonics here, Andrew. And what we're going to do is I'll play it with right around 10% for now harmonics. I guess 968 if they want me to. And we'll play it down, and then we'll change it. We'll crank it and see what the difference is. So here it is with just 9%. Okay, so there's 9% harmonics involved. Let's crank it to 200. Now, it sounds like we're actually changing the pitch of this. And so that's what I meant by undertones, overtones, and harmonics. These are above and below. So what it's really doing is covering a huge range of frequencies and applying that quote unquote excitement to all of them. Now, that's in this case going way above 2000 hertz. We're probably up around the 10K area at that point when you crank up that harmonics. So it's basically just going to cover additional frequencies. How many frequencies around that 200 hertz, or sorry, 2000 hertz, are we going to cover? Only about 15% above or below, or we're going to cover 200% above and below? The other option we didn't mess around with was color. So let's listen to color. We'll pop this back out at 58 so you can hear a difference. Here's color 1. You can hear my snare is really cutting through now. Here's color 2. Not a huge difference in 58%. You probably see a bigger difference if we crank it. But, you know, these are just options you're given. And if you are listening and trying to achieve a certain sound, you should know that there's probably only a few things you can change here. There's only a certain amount of things you can mess around with. So what you should do is just kind of play around. I mean, you're going to hear engineers, professional engineers, basically say, just start tweaking the controls until you get to the desired signal you're looking for. They're not going to say, well, for this snare, you need to have this, this, and this. There's no manual. I've said that a million times. So a lot of it is knowing what these buttons and dials do and then using them to get to a place you want to be. That's always been my mantra since day one with any plugin available in any software. We'll take the exciter off for a moment. I think I covered enough of what I want to cover for that. But just in retrospect, I would probably use an exciter on an individual track if that track needed it. But I've also used an exciter as part of a mastering signal chain. And we will get to mastering in the upcoming weeks. And I think it's important to realize that a mastering session usually does include an exciter somewhere in there. Now, how much of that exciter and what frequencies you're looking at and what it needs all depends on the project you're working with. But we will we'll get there when we get into the mastering part. All right, so excitement to your piece. Boom. I mean, naturally, you can just add higher frequency signals. You know, guitars that are a little higher frequency. And by excitement, I assume you mean, you know, an adverb or an adjective. Exciting? No, whatever. I'm not using. Not an English teacher. But yeah, basically describing what your energy of your project is. So, you know, try to add additional instrumentation. If just adding brightness technically to things isn't working, then you probably have to just add more things. If it sounds flat, it sounds weak. A lot of times plugins aren't going to help with that. So you might want to add, you know, instruments that will liven up your piece. That's a good way to describe it. What other filters can be applied to audio tracks to enhance them? Well, we went through a lot of plugins already, and we just talked about the exciter. But let's take a look while you're there, while we're here, actually. And I'm going to come over to this and just see what this is all about, or not, because I have the cycle on. And we'll put the cycle on over here just so we have it.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
So, I mean, this particular vocal track recorded with this mic that I'm talking into now just had EQ and compressor. And I think that it really stands out. It's a well recorded, well placed piece. There's other things I could do. We did talk about a de-esser. So I don't know if you can hear specifically what's going on in my recording here, but the de-esser might help a little bit. So let's pop in my de-esser and let's do reducing presence here. And let's see how that helped.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
And you actually can hear this is a test only on the punch in actually is now more subtle, that those S's don't pop out. Here it is without it.
Punch in, and this is a test.
See, this is a test. Now let's put it on there and hear how it smoothed it out.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
And now it's much smoother. It's not as, the S's aren't as harsh. So that's one of the plugins that I would potentially put on an audio track to help it out. Other things I have used, depending on what you're recording, we did talk about noise gates. Basically, when a loud signal is present, the gate is open and lets the signal through. When the loud sound has dipped below a certain threshold, the gate closes and basically mutes the track. And it's constantly looking ahead to find out when it should open and when it should close. And I'd use that a lot of times on, tom drums and room mics sometimes if I only want the room mic to open up when the sound gets louder. Otherwise, it's too much of the room or the environment. Other things I've added before, distortion. Bit crusher is a really nasty sounding thing, but it's a really cool result if you're looking for that signal. So this is bit crusher.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
So you could hear it just slightly. And so what we're doing is we're actually cropping off our transients. You can see it here. The waveform never really went beyond a certain way. And we could actually crush it down, crush. And now it gets really nasty.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
You can hear that nasty digital, almost distortion level sound. But I've used it. I've used it in sound effects for movie and films. I've used it for background vocals or ad libs and stuff like that to kind of give it some variation from the main vocals. Main vocals should stand out. The backup vocals shouldn't. And they should also not be exactly the same as the main vocals. So sometimes you add, little bits and pieces or subtle things to change it just ever so slightly. So it sounds like a different, it should be a different performance, but it sounds like a different part. Delay we've went over. Modulation. These could be fun. I've messed around with some chorus stuff before. If you don't know what chorus is,
punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
And you can hear it almost being a little wavy in the background. And it's basically cycling and producing, but there's, again, presets here where you can actually get an idea of what this plugin is doing just by reading the descriptions. For instance, a slow chorus, an oscillating modulation. Yeah, well, that means we're oscillating and spinning and cycling, and modulating means going up and down. I've used it as a vocal. This is the preset that I would use, or at least start with, to see where we're at. So if I was doing a backup vocal track, I would probably put a chorus in for the backup vocals. And so this is what that sounds like.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
And you can hear it almost sounds like there's a slight doubling, some weirdness going on. I'm going to mix it in a little more so you can really hear it. Here it is.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
So that's pretty much where, sometimes the backup vocals really need some sort of differentiation from the main vocals. And so this is one of the tools that definitely can help you do that. What else is in modulation? Yeah, a lot of this other stuff is very sound effect based. Basically, you're saying I'm going to change it so much it's going to be a sound effect as opposed to just a plugin to help. One I have used is the Tremolo. Again, another type of plugin that kind of um, oscillates and bounces a little bit. So this is what that sounds like.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
So what we're doing there is actually we are snapping into a 1/4-inch grid, basically meaning that we are quantizing the tremolo. The depth is really deep, so you can see it comes up, you can hear it nice and loud, and then it kind of dips out, again, goes back, and it keeps doing this over and over and over again during the course of your playback. And again, there's also presets here. So one basically that a deep tremolo would mean you have a really big depth, so it'd be a quick rise and a very slow, a very fast release, long sustain down there at the final release too. Mono tremolo looks very similar to what we had before. There's some panning information here. This is interesting. So take a listen to this.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
Sounds almost like stuttering, right? And you can actually see the stuttering happening here. Volume gone, volume gone. So I haven't used hard panning before, but I've used a tremolo just to kind of, again, create some variation in a backing track, and to separate it out from other things. What would be really cool for something like that particular plugin and preset we just used is a guitar. A guitar just, finger picking. And if you get it in the right rhythm with the right pattern, it's going to be really cool. It's going to almost sound like a digital guitar. So you can actually mess around with that, have some fun. And yeah, then there's a whole bunch of other things here. I mean, I'm not going to do these all today, but you can mess around with them all you want. The other one that I've used, things like pitch correction, pitch shifting, and vocal transformer. So a lot of people, obviously, in our day and age and the type of music you're listening to, there's a lot of artists using pitch correction over the top, getting that T-Pain effect, who the pioneer of the old pitch bend vocal tracks. But that's not what this is. I mean, this can do that, but not as good as some other third-party programs. Actually, I think T-Pain came out with his own plugin, now that I think about it, which makes anyone sound like T-Pain. And it's just settings. It's basically just pulling notes above and below central frequencies. So this one really wasn't meant to do that. This one's very basic. I'm not a fan of it. I don't use pitch correction. And if my artist cannot sing, I'm going to let them know you can't sing. You got to go back and try it again or practice more or do something. There's no amount of wizardry in the world that can make you sound good, ma'am or sir. So I'm not going to even bother sitting here trying to figure out pitch correction on your voice. But this is what it looks like. So you got your range, whether you're going to be low or high, left or right hand, if anyone's a piano player. That's what these mean. This is your low, and this is your right hand at middle C and above. You have your root root. Well, it is a frequency really, but a root note value, from middle C to all the way to B. So every note in the octave is here. And then, of course, once you know your root note, then you can pick your scale. And these scales are pretty crazy. People that aren't musically savvy won't know what pentatonics are, or a melodic min scale, or minimal or minor scale. It's really major chords, and then of course the 6/9, which is a time-based system, and of course depends also on what kind of notes are going to be available to you. So let me pick 6/9 for a second. So I'll show you this. In a 6/9 with a root of C, you'll see F doesn't exist, B doesn't exist, and I do not believe any of these keys exist either. So it's C, D, E, G, and A, and that's it. That's the only thing in that scale. So if I were to pitch my voice to C, D, E, G, A, this goes through and tries to pull them to the closest note, and it does sound a little weird.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
And
Punch
so,
in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
does sound like I have water in my mouth. So it's trying to take what I said. Obviously, I didn't sing that, and I have no tonal value to what I spoke. It was very monotone, but it tries to pull it to the nearest note, and it kind of creates that effect. Now, I've used pitch correction on acoustic guitars. If I found like my acoustic guitar was just slightly off, if whoever recorded something or brought something to me, and I want to really pull it into the rest of the music, you're finding that that guitar really doesn't sit well with the rest, then I'll use pitch correction on a guitar and make it subtle. So it's just a little better in the mix. It sits better with the other instruments. It plays nice. I find that also with things like violins and string instruments in an orchestra. Sometimes the string instruments aren't tuned right. And even though the conductor had his tuning moment, and even though the instrument people or a musician sitting in the orchestra pit all tuned up, maybe throughout the course of a project or a song, I find that the tuning went. And so I'll use my tuning elements to create a better mix between strings, horns, and same thing with horns. Wow, you got a question. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. I've been like lately. I've been like using that plugin, the pitch correction.
Yeah.
I've been taking like pre-recorded audio
Yeah.
and like pitch correct them. But like, can you try like with pitch correct something live while you singing it?
What do you mean live? You want me to
Like,
sing something right now?
yes,
No,
like
it's a bad idea. No, I'm kidding. I can do simple stuff. So let me see here. I'll just hold a note as best I can.
yeah, because I be trying to study because since I don't have a mic, it's harder to like learn like everything about it since I don't have a mic to
Yeah, I
actually.
hear you. I know. So I'm just gonna put on the echo here for a second so I can put my voice in. I'll just do a do, yeah, something easy, and then we can see how pitch correction works. Here you go.
Oh.
Do, do, ba-da-bop, bop, 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 bop. Right. So there you go. There's something, Wawa. All right. So now let's see what we can do here. And you could actually, I don't know if you guys heard it in this last take. Sorry, in the first take rather. Let's make the first take the thing here. I could actually hear it back in real time as I was recording, very slightly. So let's listen back to this. See, I told you it's a little crazy. It's not quite what you would want, but. And so I probably am not in the right key for this. Like I said, we already kind of played around with it. Let me see. I forget what I used for my key in the violins. Let's see. Looks like it's in. Looks like it's in D. C. Well, it's probably the root of C. Yeah, it's probably C. All right. So if I go into my pitch corrector and I put it into a let's say major scale into C. Let's see how that affects. So I'm basing this on my notes that I played, the music that's there in the violins. So I want my vocals to kind of try to snap closer to that. Let's see how it works. And so it's getting there. You know, I'd probably mess around with some of these other scales. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. Let's detune it a little bit. Yeah, I'm getting there. So yeah, I mean, you can hear my voice here. I'll let you guys hear. So it is kind of doing the bending part that most people want out of a pitch correction. So as good as that is, it still isn't great. Obviously, you need a better recording, a better performance. And then in my estimation, I could probably do this a lot better using something like a Melodyne or using Isotope Nectar. So while we're kind of just talking, oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. While we're there, let's talk about some third-party plugins because that was an interesting idea. Oh, crap, I don't have my I do not have my my iLock key to get into that. But one of the ones I like a lot for pitch correction, better than what um, the one that comes with Logic is Isotope. Isotope makes something called Isotope Nectar, and it's not here right now, but I do have it. Um, and it actually is a much better pitch correction based plugin. So for us, like I said, that pitch corrector that I just used is pretty gnarly, and it's harder to kind of manage because all you're working with is this little keyboard, and that's it, and then some scales. So let's do a major chord because that's I think what I'm using here. Here we go. Hey, that was actually better. I like that better. Yeah, hey, listen. And that's certainly not what I did. I did not attempt to even do my little woos in the same scale with the same notes. I just haphazardly did it. So yeah, my major chord, which is C, E, G, is what I'm playing there at the very beginning of the violins. So very cool concept. Gab, will you have a follow-up question? Maybe not. Maybe no. Okay. But yeah, I mean, those are the things you have to do. You do have
Yeah.
to. Okay, yeah. What's up?
So what if you use flex page and then you use that? Wouldn't that help?
Yeah, yes and no. So what Wawa was talking about is another new feature we haven't really even gotten to yet, which we will, called Flex Pitch. Oh, I'm going to mute you because it's distorting out my thing here. So yeah, the program now has this really cool feature that works like Flex Time did, but now it's Flex Pitch. Wow, I love it. Let's talk about that later. Let's not do that this second because now we're going to get into another 20-minute lesson, and I'd rather save it for its own lesson. I'm simply just trying to go through the questions that we had. But you're right. Flex Pitch was built after the programs like Melodyne and Nectar, but I still don't think they do the things that Melodyne and Nectar do the best. I still think it's not quite there yet. So for me, I'm going to say as a general answer to that question, no, I don't think Flex Pitch is going to be perfect, but it does relatively what we're doing now. And that's basically creating a chord and having my vocals flex to that chord. All right. Just to give you a short answer to your short question. We'll get back to it. I promise you. All right, let's go over to our next question. Any other questions about what other filters are available? I mean, that's pretty much all we talked about just now. It's all the other stuff.
I have a quick question.
Go for it.
This is about delay. So,
Okay.
how do you make the delay in sync with the tempo of the track?
Oh, that's easy. All right, so we're going to go into our delay plugin like we had. Delay. So as you can see, and I'm going to just put everything in so you can see stuff here. Our tempo is 120, right? See that at the top. I'll go back into this. Just wanted to show you that. If I get my metronome on, here it is. So I have a delay plugin on right now. It's a single delay. I can change that. The delay of the plugin that we're using right now is already synced up. You see where this area is? It says sync and grid. So we're on a 1/16 grid, just like quantization. I can unsync it. I could change it. But if you hit sync, you're now looking at the project BPM, looking at the grid lines. And as long as your performance is on the grid, which I think it was kinda, your delays will be on the grid. So then we can go in and just, again, create like a simple pan of it. So let's hear how this sounds. And I'm leaving the click on so you can see how it syncs up with the project BPM here. right? And let me take the click off now so you can hear how it works with the melody. Pretty cool, right? So, that's an easy one. Delays in Delay Designer are already syncing up the project as long as you have this active. Now, can you change that a little bit? Yeah, you can swing it off and on the grid. You can actually tap in your own. You can delete every second or every other or every odd number delay in this one, or you could just choose a different type of delay. This one's a 1/16th, and I'm sure if we go down to a 1/8 or a quarter, obviously there's less delays in that, so they're going to be a little different. It's actually not sounding terrible. I'm kind of getting used to it. So yeah, that's just a again cool way of to kind of messing around with this and utilizing the tools that are here. Like I said, the great thing about Delay Designer is it already syncs up with the project. So hopefully we answered that for you. Question number, God knows. What microphones work better with amps? Well, we did this back in those 3 days before Thanksgiving. So we talked about a couple of mics that would be really good for guitars. The most common one used out there is the SM57. If you don't know what that is, I can hear my daughter playing flute. Congratulations, you guys are all being serenaded. All right, so if I just type into like Sweetwater guitar mics, right? Easy enough. Wow, there's going to be a list of all these mics that people use on guitars. This one's actually a cool idea. They give you a nice little bundle of a vocal mic and a guitar mic. We have the Sennheiser E609 and the 906. Some people like to use, we have the MD421. We had this one in class. Some people do like ribbon mics on a guitar. Why? Why would you like a ribbon mic on a guitar? Well, I'll tell you why. Ribbon mics can handle a very loud signal, like super loud, super close signal. So ribbon mics are very good at that. So yeah, why not? And it's going to give you a nice smooth texture. It doesn't take on the high frequencies like a large capsule condenser would. So you're really going to get some of the nice smooth tones out of an amp. And it also depends on what kind of music you're playing. You're playing country or you're playing metal. Two different ends of the spectrum for guitar players. But the go-to for most people is the SM57 in this world. Because of the cost, obviously, is $100. You can get a good guitar mic, and it sounds delicious. Now, this mic, the SM7B, is actually modeled after the SM57. It has relatively the same tonal qualities and the same durability, and they're both dynamics. So again, they handle loud signals, really loud signals. Their max SPL is way up there, like 120, 130. And their tonal features really sit in that mid, I'll say low mids to low highs, that range. And then they make, specialty mics for guitars as well. They make stuff for acoustics. So all that's relative to the type of music you want to record. To answer that question fully, microphones that are built for that amp. If that amp is super loud, you want something dynamic to handle the high SPLs. If you're working with a acoustic guitar plugged into an amplifier, it's going to be a little lower. Again, it's all, some of these answers are going to be relative to what you're doing, but simple research and simple experience will get you there. A few more before we end here. How can I duplicate a track, then make it sound different so it can be layered? Well, we kind of already touched on that, and we're going to wrap on that. Everyone, give me one pause. I just realized my computer is not plugged in, and I'm losing battery power as we speak. I don't want to lose you when my computer goes out. I'm down to 15%. So give me 3 seconds. I'm just going to go down and grab my cable.
It was a good Wawa.
What's up, man?
Sup
I
with
see
y'all?
your face.
What up, dog? What up, Wawa?
What- Yeah. What's up, Karina? What's up, Ryan?
Good,
What's up,
Wawa.
Vince? Not much, man.
Good.
Chilling. What's up, Anthony?
Oh, what up?
Yo, is Deja here?
Deja, I don't know. But Deja, is your phone?
Closeness.
You
Yeah,
cute ass
Deja.
over here. Yeah, she here.
Would you happen to have the gym work?
I thank you.
Hey, yo,
Um,
anybody got
I'd be
the
so tight
my homework?
right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some of that gym work too.
all right, all right. This is started a trend here.
All right, I'm back. So how can I duplicate a track and let's see, make it sound different so it can be layered. All right, let's do this. Here we go. Let's make an exact duplicate of this track, the Vox track. We'll hit this little button here. It actually copies everything down. We'll actually make a exact copy of my vocal track here. Couple things that happen here. Obviously, you know, when we have two signals playing at the same time with the exact same starting point, they tend to add their volume when they're in sync or in phase, rather. You can see they're very much in phase. When I super zoom in and I go into it down to here, you can see they're very much in phase. So they will start to double the signal and really overpower the mix. And that's not always what you want. If you recorded it correctly, you don't need two of the same signal. But the question was, how do I take that duplicate track and make it sound a little different? First thing, personally, I would do is I would take it from a mono track and start working it in stereo a little more. And basically what this does is change a little bit of the context of when these two talk together nicely in the mix. Because a lot of times, let's see, things will start to get out of your control. All right, and that's kind of what you want to avoid. You don't want to have a project that all of a sudden it's just way too much information, way too much sound, and you got to pull back tremendously because by the time you were done and you added all this other stuff, it wasn't quite what you wanted it to be. What I would do for something like this is obviously this track has the delay and this track has the pitch. This track, I'm actually going to pull the delay off. I'm actually going to lower the track volume tremendously just to adjust to having two signals in sync. And then I'm going to probably add something that's going to really pull it out. And I said, you know, turning the track into stereo, but really what we want to do is maybe work on imaging. And so I use a stereo spread. So what this actually does is pull that mono signal far out to the left and right. Presets are, you know, not a lot of options here. But the high frequency spread as opposed to low frequency spread or mid and high or light spread, the one that's the default, and we'll go back to this, it's going to give it a little sound like this. So I'm getting there. Let's try it in the high frequency spread. Okay, and I don't really like that. I'm going to pull it out further because I don't really like that. Pull this down a little bit. Have a little more of the wave go here. Good, and now I'm going to bring it back. Let's hear it. So I basically have one here that has delay. This is the one that is going to be the main vocals. And then this one down here, I change it just enough by spreading out the stereo signal from mono to stereo and then being able to, you know, really pull it further out to left and right. And it almost kind of sets it back. Like instead of being the forefront of the mix where you would hear it like right between your eyes, it actually pulls it to the back of your head a little bit. That's what the stereo spreader can do. There's also another directional spreader. That one's fun to mess with as well. So this one really pulls it way back. Let's hear this by itself. And let me put it back to a volume here. You can, and it might be difficult to hear this on your end. I don't know what kind of audio is going out to you guys, but what it did is kind of create this nice subtle signal, again, all the way in the background, leaving the foreground track above being your main track with the delays. And then the other one has more of that subtle environmental ghosting sound. That's kind of what I want to do, is just kind of fill up the entire space with that one sound. So not bad. I mean, that's one way that you can duplicate tracks and kind of set them off. But then we can go back through what we started with today and quickly talk about adding things like filtering, distortion, pitching. No, we already pitched it. Modulation, chorus. This one is always a fun one, ensemble. Check this out. Let me solo this. And now let's throw in like this really backing group here. So here, check this out. So now mix that in with the main vocal, and you're going to get a cool result. And so there's only 2 tracks here. There's only 2 tracks of vocals. And what I have is one track with a delay that almost makes it sound like there's multiple versions of it, and one track that's been pulled out, you know, hard left and right stereo, and then added an ensemble, which you can see is another few voices. And basically, to get that effect, we're instituting low frequency oscillators and a random oscillator over here. So now it sounds like, instead of 2 people, it sounds like 4 or 5 people doing the background vocals. But it's all the same track. It's all the same performance. It's 2 separate wave files, but it sounds like 4 or 5 people. One more listen. Pretty cool. So those are ways that I can kind of take copied signals, make them sound a little different, make sure that they don't overpower the mix when you do duplicate them. I'm not a big fan of duplicating in any way. I'd end up, if I had to do a second vocal track, I would probably end up just re-recording another version of this, just so it's not exact, just so it's not a perfect copy. I don't like that at all. Ends up being A, harder to work with, but B, kind of not the right way of doing things. Although a lot of people do it. You know, a lot of people take the easy way out and just duplicate tracks, take one performance and make 15 tracks out of it. That's crazy. At most, I would duplicate it and do it like this. This would be my process if I had to do it that way. So there we go. We layered some tracks, and we can do more to that tomorrow. I can also, you know, instead of doing the pitch correction on this, I could really pitch this down using the vocal transformer here. So vocal transformer, here we go. Check this out. Let's make it into a warped voice. Here. That's kind of cool. Or better yet, we leave the pitch corrector on, and then we add an additional change in pitch with the vocal transformer. So it's going to still be pitched, but we're going to disguise that voice. So here's what that sounds like. So there you go. That's kind of what you're looking to do, is same performance, same wave file, just making the other one sound really different as best you can, so it doesn't just become another exact copy, because that's just not the right way to do things. So if you are going to make a copy and layer tracks like this and duplicate tracks like this, then you got to do a lot of work to that second track to make it sound as different as you can, but while still keeping the same tonal properties and all the other good stuff that makes it sound cool. So there you go. I think that's enough questions answered for today. We still got plenty more to go. And this is only from masterclass number 1. We still have questions from masterclass number 2. Please be sure over the next few days to get all your work done. So your classwork is all here. Obviously, your projects from 8, B, C, and D, your quizzes, if you haven't taken them, take them. Your Logic Pro Masterclass 1 and 2. Your quiz from last week, if you haven't taken it, please take it. You have a project due this Friday, project number 10. If you haven't looked at that yet, please make sure you look at that. And then our math and science integration. And then also, I heard you guys speaking about it, but make sure you get your gym done and send it over to Miss Carciolo. All right. Any other questions before we get out of here today? Great. All right. So I will check you guys tomorrow, 10 a.m., bright and early. Good stuff. Everyone enjoy the rest of their day. We'll catch you tomorrow, and we'll do some more work. All right. Have a good day. Ow.